This is our meals and moments video. This is where I get to share some of the meals that we're making and some behind the scenes of our lives. I hope you follow along and get to see 2 weeks of our life. We did this every 2 weeks for the entire year of 2025, and now going into 2026, we're going to continue putting these videos out every 2 weeks. But this is episode 2 in season 2. If you're just meeting me, my name is Amy Cross, and this is The Cross Legacy, where I teach you how to save money on groceries. Our grocery budget is $135 per person per month, and it's just my husband and I living here in the house. So our grocery budget is $270 per month. And all of the food that we have in our house has been using that same grocery budget for many years now. And it's really neat to be able to see how we transition using these ingredients to make multiple different meals. In this video, I'm going to be sharing some of the recipes we made and also a trip that we went on and what I brought along with us to make sure that we could keep our costs down. This video starts on January 15th through the end of the month, and I had just went grocery shopping a few days prior to this, and that grocery haul video is already up on the channel. I also like how some of these recipes are showing how I'm using produce and other items that I bought many months ago and making them into new and interesting meals to use in this season of our lives. For the first recipe I'm going to share, I made this butternut squash Brussels sprout chicken dish, which I ended up cooking in one pan, and it was really easy. I'm going to walk you through some of the steps that I did, but doesn't it look delicious? Many months ago, back in October, I bought a ton of different squashes, and I have been storing those actually in my hallway. We haven't even got them down into the pantry, but they have been washed and stored, and so they have lasted a really long time. I want to make sure that I'm starting to use up the rest of them. So I ended up using one of the butternut squashes and this peeler that I got for Christmas. This went through the butternut squash like butter. It was so easy. While I was making dinner, I also found out that some of my family members were going to join us for dinner. So I ended up cutting up the chicken a little bit smaller, which ended up cooking it a lot faster. And I seared that in the pan first as I was chopping up the produce items, which was the butternut squash and then the Brussels sprouts, which I added over the top of the seared chicken. I just put that in the oven after I seared the chicken with the produce items on top of it and let that bake while I got to visit with my family. Towards the end of the baking time, as things were starting to get fork tender, I added some dressing on top of this. This is a balsamic maple dressing that I make that I had in the refrigerator from the last time I made Brussels sprout salad. So I was glad to be able to use something up that I had in the refrigerator, and I know that my family really likes it. And then I ended up also sneaking in some raisins onto the dish and some Parmesan cheese just to make sure that everybody would like dinner. The next dinner we had was just a super easy sloppy joes that I already had pre-cooked and in the freezer. I just pulled out the sloppy joes and some hamburger buns that I had in the freezer, and then we used them with some tater tots that we had left over from the last time we made tater tot casserole. And then I had also made some homemade applesauce a couple days prior that is cinnamon applesauce, so it is kind of a darker color. But that's what we had for dinner, and it was really easy, and I've been glad to use up the rest of those apples that were from September. Since we were getting ready to go on a trip in a couple days, I was trying to use up some of the things that I had in the refrigerator or the pantry that I wanted to use up before we left. So I did have some circle sourdough bread, and it's like in legit circles that we get from Costco every few months. I keep those in the freezer, and we just pull out a couple pieces at a time. But I still had a few pieces left in the pantry, and so we used that sourdough bread for some fried egg sandwiches. I love that we're able to keep bread in the freezer and just pull out whatever we need for that meal or that meal and an extra meal, and we're not having to go through as much bread at a time. And with that sandwich, I was also trying to use up some of the eggs that we had in the house and some lunch meat that we wanted to use up so I could open up a new package to take with us on the trip. A couple days before we left, I did make sure that I made a large batch of taco meat. That is something that we always take to Airbnbs with us because it's so versatile. So we had tacos that night for dinner, and then I put the other portions away in the freezer so that way we weren't having tacos on multiple nights. So I was able to take a frozen container of meat with us to the Airbnb. This was kind of a meal that I was just putting together with things that I had. So I ended up cooking some zucchini and onions, and I added some shredded beef that I had in the refrigerator that I wanted to use up. And with that, we had protein pasta, and I ended up making a beefy noodle dish. For this weekend, we ended up renting an Airbnb in the snow, so we got to spend some quality family time all together. But I did make sure before we left for the trip, I sent out an email with all the ingredients I was planning on bringing, and also warning everyone that it was my birthday and I wasn't washing dishes all weekend. So we were with our kiddos and our best friends, and we got to stay at this beautiful Airbnb. But with that, I ended up bringing groceries along. I ended up bringing 24 eggs, a bunch of different kinds of cheeses that we used for different meals, and for a charcuterie board. I also had some salami in my fridge, and I made sure that I marked that down on the list that I was bringing that. And then I brought some produce items like peppers and onions. We brought that taco meat that I had made a few days prior that was in the freezer, and I also had some frozen breakfast sausage in the freezer that I was able to put into the coolers, and that was already cooked also, so it made it really easy. And then we brought some tortillas with us so we could make either quesadillas or tacos. It was really versatile for however we wanted to use them while we were at the Airbnb. And then I made sure that I packed some car snacks, which I was kind of laughing. We still have some beef jerky left. When we were coming over here looking for our new house, I had bought beef jerky last spring, and we still have some of that left. So I made sure to bring that on the trip, and some milk and different things that we needed to make coffee. And I did bring a case of water and then some liquid IV for choices to make sure that everybody had things to drink. And then I told the kids to bring their favorite snacks and whatever drinks that they want that weren't water or coffee or milk. And so everybody was able to bring the things that they wanted. But while we were there, it was great having the ingredients that we needed. So whoever was hungry at whatever time could make their own meal or snack. And we weren't on any kind of set schedule. We did go out to eat for dinner, and that was really lovely to be able to have a nice sit-down meal. And I had this beautiful salad for one of the meals. The whole weekend, we just spent doing some quiet activities when we needed it to be quiet, and also some fun games. We did a lot of sledding and going for walks, and even doing a puzzle watching deer in the backyard. After we got back home, one of the first things I did was pull a frozen whole chicken out of the freezer, and I ended up cooking that in the Instapot from frozen. It just takes a little bit over an hour for it to cook all the way. And we had some asparagus and some beets with that. Mike has decided that he likes beets recently, and so it's really great to be able to add another vegetable to his like list. After we had dinner, I ended up taking the rest of the chicken and dividing that up and putting it into glass containers to go into the freezer. And then I used those bones to go back into the Instapot to make some chicken stock. And that chicken stock, I ended up putting most of it into super cubes, and that went into the freezer. And then I left a little bit in the refrigerator to use up within the next few days. I try really hard to keep an eye on things that I have in the freezer, and I'm rotating those things out every 3 to 6 months and making sure that we're using them. So I ended up pulling out 3 jars that were all about halfway full of chili out of the freezer. And then I saw some apple cider that was in there when I was pulling out the chili. The apple cider was from a harvest festival way back in early fall, and that ended up going into the freezer in the gallon jug, which is too much for just Mike and I to have out for a little while. So I wanted to defrost that so I could put it in smaller containers and then refreeze it, and that way we can take out smaller portions anytime in the next couple months. And while I was taking inventory in the freezer, I saw a container of cooked onions, peppers, and it had potatoes in it. This was something that was left over from a breakfast I was making a while back, and I decided to add some kielbasa or sausage to that and just use it for dinner. And to wrap this up, we had a super easy dinner of having our Christmas lasagna, the last of it that was left over from Christmas, right here at the end of January. So I love that we're using up some of those heavier meals that are in our freezer before we're getting into the early spring and nicer weather. And while we were having these easy meals, we were also getting the pantry shelves up in our pantry. So the next video, I'll be able to show you what our pantry looks like now. So all the things that we were doing with all these ingredients, they were all with that $270 grocery budget that we've had for 2 years now. Before then, we had other family members living in the house, but it has always been based at $135 per person per month. So I was able to bring those ingredients into the Airbnb and feed multiple people, but they were also bringing in their snack. But our grocery budget didn't change. If you're new here, make sure that you're hitting subscribe. We put out 3 new videos every single week, and I spend time every single day making sure that I have all of your questions answered. So if there is a recipe that you want to learn more about, we might already have it on the blog and I can send you a link. Or if we get enough people asking, then I can also make a video for it. All of my secrets on how I'm able to keep produce lasting long enough to be able to use it up, I have in my Zero Waste Produce Guide. This book goes through 75 produce items A to Z. And then I also keep track of all of my spending and all of the ingredients we have in the house and the meals that I'm making in our grocery planner. This is such a lifesaver to be able to look back through past seasons and take meal inspiration from things that your family already likes to have. These are both linked in the description below with a discount code when you buy them from our website. And there's 5 different covers of the planners to be able to choose from. We post all of our grocery hauls here on the channel, so make sure that you're checking that out and you can see how I'm sticking to that grocery budget of $135 per person, which ends up being $4.44 per day.